Welcome to Health System CIO's interview with Joy O, Chief Information and Digital Transformation Officer with the Christ Hospital Health Network. I'm Anthony Guerra, founder and editor-in-chief. Joy, thanks for joining me.
Oh, you're welcome. Happy to be here.
All right, very good, Joy. You want to start off by telling me about your organization and your role?
Yeah, absolutely. Christ Hospital, we are a health system in Southeast Ohio, based out of Cincinnati, and really known for certain areas of specialties such as cardiovascular, particularly MSK. I'm just privileged to lead a really strong team of IT professionals. Been there for about since last October. So
Mm-hmm.
still sometimes feeling like I'm drinking from the proverbial fire hose, but
Sure.
it's been a lot of fun and there's been a lot going on. It's very
All right,
exciting times.
awesome. Yes, I'm looking forward to learn about the a lot going on part. But I like to discuss with people sort of unique things that they're up to or experiencing. And for you, certainly starting a position six months ago is going to have you experience a lot of interesting things that everyone's going to go through when they take on a new role. So I'd like to talk to you first a little bit about starting a new role at your level, at the level that
Mhm.
you've come in at. You've done it before, Corewell Health, then Moffitt, and now the Christ Hospital Network. So you perhaps have a little experience sort of jumping in and getting acclimated. But what are your thoughts at a high level about when you start a role like this? What are you trying to accomplish in the first 30 days, the first 90 days, that type of a thing? I assume it's a strategy that can be repeated or that others can try and do.
No, absolutely. For me personally, and I think this is true in general, at the beginning of starting any kind of role, especially at an executive level, it's all about developing those relationships and really getting a grasp of kind of your environment and the circumstances that you're walking into. I think especially somebody like me who's one, a type A and kind of a doer, and then two, in the technology space, there's a tendency to want to go in and maybe try to, solve problems right away,
Mm-hmm.
put in solutions, especially things that maybe have worked in prior
Right.
organizations. And I've come to learn that every organization is different, even though we're all health systems, and there's going to be different stages of maturity, different processes. Culture makes a huge factor as well, right? What might go well in one system might not go over very well at all in another, right? And depending
Mm-hmm.
on, how collaborative they are, for example, or the way people like to communicate. And so, that first 30, 60 days, my time is spent really meeting as many people as I can, including stakeholders, members of my own IT team, and not only just my direct reports, but everybody from a management level all the way. I try to meet with individual contributors. I try to attend team meetings. I like to spend time visiting the hospital and just really seeing how things are operating and where there are opportunity. That being said, if I do, coming in, if there is some kind of burning issue, of course I
Right.
will help, and try to take leadership over, what's going on. Because patient care is still patient care, right? But really at the beginning, it's about just really trying to understand. And then from there, slowly, then it's about coming up with, more of a mid to long-term plan. And I like to think about it really typically, and the adage, people process technology, right?
Mm-hmm.
What are all the strengths in each of these areas, and where are the areas where there's opportunity? And and you break it down further, and it's probably something pretty common that most do, and then use that to come up with a plan. And of course, part of it too is also making sure that your boss, whoever your new boss is, what are their expectations, right? I think sometimes also, it's easy to kind of jump in, but there's usually a reason why you were chosen for the role, right? The
Mm-hmm.
expectations that you would be able to do something. And so, really staying very close to the expectations of my new leader and what are they looking to do. And, Debbie Hayes, our CEO, she has been fantastic. And she has actually told me from the very beginning, don't feel pressured to come up with a plan right away, really get to know people and really get to understand our organization, and then we'll discuss. But she also said specifically that she was looking for me as a CIDTO
Hmm.
to start thinking about how do we move the needle from a digital standpoint forward. My role was actually changed where before I arrived, this was only a CIO role, and then she specifically changed it to be the Chief Information and Digital Transformation Officer because she felt like there was just opportunities and need to leverage technology to become a differentiator and to, maybe solve some of the operational or challenges that they had. And so that I
Hmm.
knew going in that that was going to be a big part of my role as well.
Yeah, it's fascinating to me. There's a lot going on, right? There's a lot of things happening. You mentioned the culture of the organization and the level that they embrace change. And nobody likes change, right? No human being likes change. Some are more averse to change than others. But you have the level of change that is sort of the entity itself seems willing to embrace. But then you also have, as you mentioned, your mandate, right? So you could come
Mhm.
in to a place and the mandate could be, hey, everything's going pretty good. We don't really want you to go nuts. We don't want, well, whoever you're reporting to might not have an interest in friction, right? I don't want
Right,
friction. I just want you to
right,
make everybody happy. I don't want people coming to my office complaining.
right.
Or you could have a mandate of, hey, things need to change around here.
Hmm.
People aren't going to love it. Nobody loves change.
Hmm.
I've got your back. Do what you
Yep.
got to do out there, and I'm ready to take those meetings and
Hmm.
continue to support you. So those are very different kinds of messaging you could get. And as you mentioned, it's important to know what your mandate is. I'd like you to
Right.
talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So, you know, I was very fortunate, I think, walk into an organization that was pretty mature. Now I'm talking about from a IT specific standpoint. The team was very well tenured, very low turnover. And, from a system standpoint, for example, we were a very, very early system who adopted Epic.
Hmm.
And, we've always taken an approach of Epic first. And so we don't have a lot of the, Frankensteins you sometimes see from a system standpoint. And
Hmm.
so I knew coming in, and it was validated that core IT was pretty stable.
Hmm.
Not dealing with a lot of outages, unplanned outages and kind of crises. And so, the mandate that was for me was really around, I would say two things. One is, how do we best leverage technology to move the needle forward? Especially when it came to the clinician efficiencies and experience and the patient experience. And then the second one was around how do we do that with the limited resources that we have, right? Because it's one thing to be able to say, yeah, these are all the newfangled technologies that we think can, make Christ like the best hospital system in Ohio, if not more, but that's going to come at a cost.
Hmm.
And so, the part that, and I think that's the part that's challenging, right? Is how do I figure out the resources from a people, from a dollar standpoint, um, if I do get buy-in for these recommendations to make it work, right? And influence, to your point, absolutely, and influence the organization to get their buy-in, because it's not just my boss that needs to get buy-in, because, some of these things where you want to put in technology to drive change, it's going to require process change, right? It's going to require process standardization and um, adoption and communication. And so, I think those are probably the main areas that I was asked to look at and come up with thoughts and recommendations on.
Right. So that's also interesting. You go into a position and again, you have to understand the realm of the possible, right? So it sounds
Hmm.
like in your particular position, change was in the realm of the possible.
Hmm.
Change was wanted, but
Hmm.
an unlimited budget was not in the realm of the possible, right?
Correct.
That wasn't
Correct.
part of the deal. You could go to a place that says, you got plenty of money to spend, but people don't like change around here, and I don't like conflict, so I don't want to hear anybody complaining.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Totally different environment. Not that you would ever hear that exactly, but again, you're operating under an environment where go do stuff, but do stuff on a budget. Okay, now I
Mm-hmm.
know my parameters for
Right.
operating. Right?
Hmm.
Very
And I think
good.
that's not uncommon from a health system
Sure.
standpoint. We're all
Absolutely.
dealing with the similar pressures.
Yeah, well, that's and that's a good point, and we hear that a lot around these ambient technologies that sort of there's a soft ROI there. Everybody pretty much believes. You said one of your mandates is physician experience. Everybody pretty
Hmm.
much believes that these are technologies that help, that make physicians happier, reduce the pajama time and all that.
Hmm.
However, there's kind of a soft ROI, not a super hard ROI on those, and they're expensive. So
Hmm.
there's some challenges there when you're operating on a budget, which, as you said, most health systems are. Any other
Hmm.
thoughts
Hmm.
there?
Yeah, absolutely. So the one thing that I came to the conclusion that we absolutely needed was to refresh our governance process, where before it was really IT just kind of doing the work first in, first out. And, the team was kind of going on the word of the person who's asking for the project on the prioritization. And so it's, whoever is the most influential, right? Whoever screams the loudest, it's whoever has the best story. Um, you know, there's certain buzzwords you can always use, saying this is a patient safety thing, this is
Mm,
compliance, this is a request of the CEO. Um, and the team wants to be helpful, right? So they were trying to get work done and churning through, but at the expense of not necessarily doing the work that would really propel us forward in terms of our overall mission and vision, as well as our strategic roadmap. So Christ does have a strategic roadmap that we refresh every year. And so, in my mind, if you can't point to how a project is going to really align and push one of those items on the roadmap forward, and it's not something that your core have to do because something's broken or it's a mandatory, truly mandatory item, then we really need to consider why we're doing it. And to your point, if there's not really a strong ROI. And so we revamped the governance process where we're focusing a lot on what is the business value that a project is going to bring, and really requiring some solid analysis and business case work, before something can even start the technology review, right? And so to your point, eh, if it's not hard dollars, because you often won't find that, what is the savings? And even if you are going to do savings, what kind of savings is it? Is it cost avoidance? Are we gaining efficiencies, right? And then if we are getting manpower efficiencies, what is that going to turn into? And so, that was a big change. I think the other big change that we made was we stood up an overall IT steering committee, and this is comprised of members of the executive team. So we're talking about the CFO, COO, right? CNO, CMO, all at that level. And this was based on multiple tries of doing IT governance, where we've done everything from trying to kind of do it at the director level, have a steering committee. We've also tried trying to do it by almost like by service line, right?
mm-hmm.
Where you have a different steering committee for, back office functions versus clinical, right? Versus research. And at the end of the day, you have one IT team,
Mm-hmm.
right? And especially there's some areas, especially such as cybersecurity, interface, infrastructure, where you don't have that specific, Epic skill set or Oracle skill set. Those types of resources are needed for all projects. And because we only have one IT team, we don't run Agile shop as an Agile shop. We needed one governance. That's what I've learned based on my years of experience, and it had to be at that top level for a couple of reasons. One is, these are the people that really understand the strategy, right? Oftentimes, when you get down to the director, the manager level, who are the people requesting projects, they're usually thinking more tactically and operationally. And, again, if we're going to spend money on an initiative, we need to really understand, what is the value that it's bringing and making us a differentiator. And second, I think it's oftentimes when we tried to do this at kind of one level down at prior organizations, people didn't feel empowered to make decisions, right? They said,
Mm.
well, I'm going to talk to my boss, right? Or I don't know enough about pharmacy. I work in, payroll, right? And so, from my observations, you really have to be like at that executive level, one, to be able to grasp, at a high level, like even I as a CIO, I should understand how core, like medical, like hospital operations work, generally speaking, right? I
Mm-hmm.
should understand, generally speaking, how we do payroll, right? There are
Right.
things, and we should be able to provide input in terms of prioritization and alignment, with our strategic vision, right? There's a reason why executives are in their roles, right? Is
Right.
their ability to really think strategically, right? The ability to make tough decisions,
Mm-hmm.
the ability to have, tough conversations, right? And so we just launched that, and all of our projects are going through that process. And so I think so it's a little bit long-winded, but I think this is crucial, even though it seems very tactical. This is the only way, one, we're going to try to do the work that provides the most value, so get the most bang for our buck, right? And then two, we are going to hopefully free up resources so we can actually do more.
Mm-hmm.
Because if we're prioritizing properly, we shouldn't have as much flip-flopping between projects, right? And, changing because someone else, there's a new hot, project of the month.
Yeah.
And by also putting a lot of emphasis on the business justification up front, we're going to free up our IT resources from doing a lot of that analysis paralysis, which was occurring, right? So every time a project was coming in, initially the IT team was just spending hours and hours, just diving straight into analysis and working with the vendors and doing the security reviews and trying to figure out, the ROM, and maybe it's not a project that we should be looking at anyway. So I think putting that governance in place is really what we need to be able to say, we've got a process. Hopefully what comes out of it is really not only the list of projects that are differentiators, but now I can also leverage the steering committee to help prioritize. Because even if you have 10 projects and they're all great projects and they all are going to
Mm.
provide value, I'm going to need some prioritization and some help, right? And so maybe there's one that's great, but we just can't do it right now. And so um, that was, one thought in terms of how are we going to overcome, the challenges in terms of, you know, finite budget.
Mm-hmm.
And then in terms of, how do we move the needle forward? So when I arrived, there was actually a pilot already that had been ongoing in the ambient listening.
Okay.
And it was successful, and we launched that. But we are we're trying to be very purposeful in how we are measuring the success of that project in terms of not only utilization, but also really, using, I guess, let me back up a little, using data to determine whether a project is really successful. Because I think sometimes a project will go live and then we're so busy, it's on to the next, right? But I think this is a great example, especially when you're dealing with new technology, of how you should really use data to determine, is this project meeting, the goals that we said it would? So we're looking at things like, of course, you mentioned it, pajama time. We're looking at the amount of overall time spent in notes. But we're also looking at, for example, things like we're able to see the percentage of after the scribe drafts a note, we're able to see the percentage of change that a doctor or clinician like made to that note.
That's
And
a good
because
one.
because you don't want to see somebody having to rewrite the whole thing, because then
Yeah.
what's the point?
Right.
But then you don't want to see somebody rubber stamping it every time either,
Good
because
point.
then it means I'm relying too much,
I'm not
right?
even
So
looking
we
at
are
it. Yeah.
right. So we are reporting, on that, on I think on a monthly cadence, right? Talking with the end users, making sure that they're trained. And especially when you're dealing with something new, such as this generative AI, I think it's just really important to make sure you make sure you're doing it responsibly, and when we're dealing with patient care, patient information, it just, I think we really just have to do it properly. So, um, when it comes in general, though, to looking for opportunities, I think that oftentimes, health systems, they try to be unique, but I think we all have very similar problems. And so why not collaborate with other systems, right? In terms of what are they working on, what's worked well and whatnot. I think there's a reason why it seems like, 75, 90% of the systems are all doing ambient listening first, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because it's kind of the easiest use case, straightforward, good technologies, kind of one step past dictation. And so again, so for me as a CIO, or CIDTO, so let's get used to it.
Yeah.
It makes sense to reach out to my peers and understand, like, what are they working on, and is it to solve the same challenges as ours? And I think I'm seeing the same themes. I think it's like around virtual nursing, it's around inbox management, it's around, patient access, right? In terms of scheduling, and, just communication preferences in terms of texting. And so I think by working together, and not trying to, reinvent the wheel every time, I think we can bring change about a lot faster and hopefully more efficiently, because I don't have pride. Like, I'm willing to learn from somebody else, what's worked for them. I'm like, okay, I'm willing to take a look at that because it worked for this system, and, try it out, right? And conversely, if it didn't work for them, like, maybe I'm going to think twice before spending too much time on something.
Excellent. I mean, first of all, I think the focus on governance is absolutely spot on, and worth every minute of your time. I would think something like that would be worth the effort you put into it, because once you get it set up, it's going to take care of a lot of problems, right? It'll solve a lot of your problems. And the other thing which you kind of touched on is people. When starting a new role, I would think, in addition to something like the governance overhaul that you did, it would be to, the whole Jim Collins with the people on the bus, the right people on the bus. There's this
Mhm,
Good to Great book. It's one of these classic right books, and one of the concepts is in there is make sure you have the right people on the bus and make sure they're in the right seats.
mhm,
And if you
mhm,
don't, get them off the bus or get them in the right seat, right?
mhm,
So, and then again, you do that, it takes care of a lot of downstream problems.
mhm,
I mean, some of these conversations can be sensitive. You have people working for you, but at a high level, when you come in and you meet, especially people that are going to report to you for the first time, there's an evaluation process going on there saying, is this someone who can come along on the journey? And
mhm,
sometimes you start to get the impression of yes or no based on the exchange, based on the level of receptiveness to some ideas or things. Is it always no? Is it always that won't work? Is it always that's not we do things around here?
mhm.
So anyway, any high, and I don't want to get you in trouble with your people here, but any high level thoughts on that element of a C-suite person like yourself taking on a new role?
Yeah,
Thoughts on making sure, at least at that super high level
yeah,
of people reporting to you, that you got the right people.
yeah, no, absolutely. And I totally agree that, leadership is critical, right? Because I can't be everywhere at once. And so my team has to really be able to understand what we're trying to do, all be rowing in the same direction, and not giving conflicting messages. And again, I think it just takes time. It really spending time with people and, investing in them. And
Hmm.
so when I first start a role, I really try to spend a lot of time with my directs, both individually and as a group. I'll oftentimes try to have like full day meetings or really just working together, right?
Hmm.
And sometimes there's a reason why somebody is resistant,
Hmm.
right? And sometimes it's, they don't like change. They're afraid of job security. I think I'm like the eighth CIO in like 10 years or something, right?
Hmm.
And so, maybe they're a little bit jaded. And so if I do observe, somebody that, maybe has opportunity, right, to be a little bit more engaged, I first want to try to understand why,
Mm.
right? And because without understanding why, you can't seek to fix the problem, right? Then you're
Hmm.
just gonna, just trying to solve the problem, just by saying we don't want to deal with it. And that's not how I like to operate. I really want to understand why. and what's behind it. And again, once you know what the problem is, then you can figure out what's the best solution.
Mm-hmm.
I don't like going the other way, saying, "Oh, I think this is the solution, and let's just try it out." I'd rather
Mm-hmm.
spend my time and try to get to know the person and understand where where their challenges might be. And, maybe it's a style thing. Sometimes
Mm-hmm.
that's a style thing. And sometimes we have to have honest conversations on like, well, this is how I communicate. How
Mm.
do you communicate? And
Yeah.
how do we make sure we don't get our wires crossed?
Mm-hmm.
And, and go from there. But I totally agree. Leadership is so important. And not only, am I only one person? I can't be everywhere at once. Like I have my strengths, I have my weaknesses. I need a team that surrounds me that can help augment, right? And that can maybe, fill in the gaps where, I could be better, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I think, but it's important to have that right makeup for sure.
Yeah. So you set the vision, work with them, see if we can get you on board, so to speak.
Hmm.
If you can get them on board, if we're making progress, good. Sometimes it's not going to work out. And what I was told by another CIO a long time ago was, if it's not going to work out, once you realize that as an executive, take care of it. Don't let things
Hmm.
persist and go. Does
Hmm.
that make sense?
Hmm. Yeah, no, absolutely. I
Yeah.
totally agree. But you have to give it a shot
Give it
first,
time.
though, right?
Right.
Yeah, I wouldn't like to make any changes you know, at very least within the first, 3 months,
Oh
if
yeah.
not longer, right?
Right.
So unless you've been kind of told to come in and kind of turn things around, but otherwise, I
Uh-huh.
think it really takes time to get to know an
Yeah.
organization and know people. So,
Awesome. Well, Joy, that's about all we had time for today. I could certainly ask you about 15 more questions around the governance and stuff, but I want to thank you so much for your time. I hope
yeah,
we can catch up down the road.
sure. Great. Thank
Have a
you.
great day, Joyce. Thank you.
Yeah.